Oops. I got the right. I wonder if I got the right thing here. No. Wait a minute. Whatever. I'll just go with it. If it doesn't work, I'll try something else. But it's supposed to be another connection. Anyway, I got my coffee here. I got my stream here. Add the stream, and I should be good to go. Okay, so I'll just go to the screen so I can see what I'm seeing. Anyway, I got this. I got a new. What do you call it? It's called AgentGPT. It's a little bit smarter, a little bit better, whatever. So I asked the question here. Let's see. So, show me the best case scenario of the mathematical possibility for the claim that a supposed single-celled common ancestor made enough accidental random mistakes which have to then be naturally selected for. Show me the number of mutations required and then compare it to the known rate of mistakes that are compatible, viable, functional, accidental, random mistakes which have to be naturally selected for. To turn a male and female worm, to turn into a male and female worm-like thing from a single-celled organism over time. Then a vertebrate, then a fish, then an amphibian, then a reptile, then a mammal, then it supposedly went back into the water, and then it had its limbs turn into fins, and then grew a tail that wags up and down instead of side by side. I forgot to say side by side. But anyways, and then got a blowhole, and then became more intelligent than humans, like the long-fin pilot whale within 2 billion years, keeping in mind that the lifespan of a single-celled organism isn't the same as the lifespan of a whale or any other supposed intermediaries. Compare the number of compatible viable mutations that are selected for through natural selection with the number of possible events in a universe, or compare it with the number of possible. Compare the number of compatible viable mutations that are selected for through natural selection with the number of possible events in the universe. Evolution isn't my claim. Anyways, it's thinking. It goes through a whole bunch of tasks and everything, thinks through a whole bunch of different things. Some of the stuff it completes, some of it doesn't complete, and it never completes calculating because it only gives you so much time. Completing research, the known rate of compatible, viable, functional, accidental, random mutations that have been naturally selected for living organisms compared to the number of mutations required for single-celled organisms to evolve into a long-fin pilot whale-like creature in 2 billion years. Well, that's not the comparison I asked for, but anyways, it says I have researched the known rate of compatible, viable, functional, accidental, random mutations that have been naturally selected for in living organisms and have compared it to the number of mutations required for a single-celled organism to evolve into a long-fin pilot whale-like creature within 2 billion years. Based on the information available, it is not possible to accurately determine the exact number of mutations required for a single-celled organism to evolve into a long-fin pilot whale-like creature within 2 billion years. The process of evolution is complex and multifaceted, and the number of mutations required would depend on numerous variables, including environmental factors, genetic drift, and natural selection. But genetic drift and natural selection have nothing to do with what's required for evolution, and that's mutation. Because the only thing that can act on the genome is the mutation. Genetic drift, variation, responding to the environment. The only thing you can do is warp the genome or make the organism more suitable to its environment. It's not going to change what it is. The only thing that's going to change what it is a mutation. However, it is known that the mutations occur in living organisms at a relatively low rate. The rate of mutation varies depending on the organisms and type of mutation, but research suggests that the average rate of mutation in humans is approximately 1.2 by 10 to the 8th power mutations per base pair per generation. 10, 10 to the minus 8? Whatever. Anyways, given the low rate of mutation and the complexity of the evolutionary process, it is unlikely that a single celled organism could evolve into a long fin pilot whale like creature within 2 billion years through the accumulation of random accidental mutations alone. It is more likely that the process of evolution involved a combination of genetic changes, natural selection, environmental factors over a much longer period of time. Much longer period of time. In other words, it's not happening. So it basically just admitted that evolution is not possible right here. But it goes back and forth. It'll go back and forth and say this, that, and the other thing, and this and that. Okay. No more subtext. Research the known rate of compatible variable accidental random mutations that have been naturally selected for a living organism. Compare it to the number of mutations required for a single-celled organism to evolve in a long-fin pilot whale-like creature within 2 billion years. Well, I guess anyways. I must clarify that the claim you presented is a purely hypothetical scenario and is not supported. Of course, it's not supported. That's what I'm trying to get you to. That's why I changed the title to Evidence for the Unscientifically or for the Scientifically Invalid Belief of Evolution, because it's not supported. Evolution is not supported by scientific evidence, and that means the theory of evolution is bunk. Evolution postulates that organisms change, adapt over time through natural selection and genetic variation, but it does not propose a specific sequence of events or a goal oriented path towards a particular species. That said, I can attempt to answer your subtext by providing a rough estimate of the time it would take for a single celled organism to accumulate necessary mutations to become a male, female, worm like thing, then vertebrate, then fish, then amphibian, then reptile, then mammal, then a whale like creature within 2 billion years. This is the closest I got for it to respond to my question. The exact number of mutations required for each transition is difficult to determine, as it would depend on various factors such as organisms' environment, natural selection pressures, genetic mechanisms, mutations. However, some studies have suggested that the rate of mutations are compatible with viable and functional offspring is around 1 in 10 to the ninth power nucleotides per generation. In other words, it's a lot. Assuming that each generation of organisms takes 1 year, which is a generous estimation, 1 year, and that each transition takes an average of 100 mutations, which is also a crude estimation, the time it would take to go from a single celled organism, whale like creature, through the proposed sequence would be. Okay, now let's look at this here. Each transition takes an average of 100 mutations. Well, it's going to take more than that. And assuming each generation of organisms takes 1 year. Each generation takes 1 year. Well, it's actually more. If you're talking about large mammals, the lifespan is more than 1 year. But anyways, he got it divided out, or it's got it divided out. Worm-like thing, 1 million years. Vertebrate, 100 million years. Fish, 50 million years. Amphibian, 600 million years. So from a fish to amphibian is 1 million years. Reptile, another 2 million years. Mammal, 1.2 billion years. Whale-like creature, 2 billion years. This timeline leaves no room for errors, setbacks, or other factors that could slow down or speed up the process. Additionally, assumes the proposed sequence is only possible. The only possible. Okay, it assumes the proposed sequence is the only possible path towards the final result, which is not necessarily what. Then it broke, and it didn't finish. Okay, investigate the amount of time. No more subtax, and that's it. It broke. So it stopped working when it started saying, which is not necessarily, it broke. Which is not necessarily the only scenario, right? But if evolution were to happen, you got to get a worm-like thing. In other words, all of the 1 million years. Oh, from a single cell. How long did it take to get a single cell, though? That's the problem. It's gone from a worm-like thing already, worm-like thing, but not from the single cell. You got to go from the single cell to a pilot whale that has more neurons than what humans have in their head. It's the only animal known, the only known animal in the world that has more neurons than humans is a long-finned pilot whale. Okay, worm-like thing, 1 million years. See, in order to get, life is supposed to be a total of 2 billion years. Life is supposed to be evolved in a total of 2 billion years. That includes getting the single-celled organism, which would be the hardest part. And of course, it's still the same problem. To get a worm-like thing is the same problem because you need a lot of information that's not there by making mistakes that are randomly possibly selected for. Maybe they are selected, maybe they're not selected for. Maybe they'll be unselected, which is another worm altogether, another can of worms altogether. Because our genome since Neanderthal has lost function and genetic information and viability since Neanderthals. Because we have a smaller genome, we're a skeleton of what we used to be, what Neanderthals were, obviously. They had better teeth, bigger brains, stronger frame, better eyesight, better hearing, better everything, which requires information. It requires a larger genome for all that stuff. But the genome is continually simplifying meaning that we're actually devolving and not evolving, because we never did evolve. Of course, nothing ever did evolve. We're losing species, we're losing organisms, we're not gaining any. So here's the scenario: if it's got to happen, you got to go. You got to get to a worm-like thing in 1 million years, which makes no sense from a single cell. How are you going to go from a single cell to a worm-like thing in 1 million years? And then to a vertebrate, it's going to take 100 million years. To a fish, it's going to take 500 million years. An amphibian is going to take a little bit more than a fish. Reptile was a couple million more than an amphibian. Mammal is 1.2 billion years. That would be like a supposed hypothetical simple mammal. But then to the pilot whale, it's going to take an additional 800 million years, which, I mean, you can't get any information. At this rate back here, where's the rate? At this rate of mutation, the rate of mutations that are compatible with viable and functional offspring is around 1 in 10 to the ninth power nucleotides per generation. How are you going to get that many viable offspring in a generation? In a generation. You're not going to get the rate of mutations that are compatible with viable and functional offspring is 1. The rate of mutations. Oh, per generation. In other words, you're not going to get a single functional mutation in one generation. It takes 1 year. Okay, assuming each generation of organisms takes 1 year. Of course, the problem is that if you're a single-celled organism, you're going to have a fast generation rate. Fish starts to get longer. Reptiles isn't so long. Amphibians isn't so long. Maybe a year, depending on what kind of amphibian. But then it starts getting, once you get to a mammal, it's more than 1 year. A generation, each generation is more than a year. Which is the point I was trying to make, is that whales, a generation for whales is more. Generation for humans is something like at least 20 years or something like that to reproduce. Sometimes it's lower, maybe 18 or something. So you're not going to get, it's assuming the average mutation, each transition takes an average of 100 mutation, which is a crude estimation. But we know for a fact in order to change from a fish to an amphibian or amphibian to reptile, you're going to need more than 100 mutations, guaranteed. You're going to need, because everything about the animal's got to change. Everything about it's got to change. I mean, everything's got to change. So we know that's wrong. That's assuming the organisms take 1 year. I mean, each generation is 1 year, and 100 mutations to transition from one thing to another. 100 mutation. This is the time frame it would have to be, which is totally absurd. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting because it actually admitted that evolution is not possible because I have a whole bunch more here where it's being hard headed and it keeps adding problems, or so I just keep adding complications. It keeps adding problems. I keep adding complications. And then, so I finally got to admit, based on the information available, it is not possible to accurately determine the exact number of mutations required for a single-celled organism to evolve into a long-fin pilot whale-like creature within 2 billion years. The process of evolution is complex. However, it's known. Where's the one? Is this the one where he admits? Okay, this is the one. He admitted. Okay, the process of evolution is complex, multifaceted, doesn't exist. The number of mutations required would depend on numerous variables, including environmental factors, genetic drift. No. And I'm saying it. In order to change from one thing to another, the only thing that's going to make that happen is mutation. Because genetic drift, responding to the environment, the most it's going to do is make you compatible to that environment. It's not going to change what you are. It'll make you look different. A lot of environmental pressures and factors will warp a frog, make a warped frog, to lose the function of the lungs, all kind of crazy stuff. But it's still a frog. However, it is known that mutations occur in living organisms at a relatively low rate. The rate of mutation varies depending on the organisms and type of mutation, but the research suggests that the average rate of mutation in humans per base pair per generation. It's a low, in other words, it's a low rate of mutations. So how are you going to get 100? How are you going to get 100 mutations to transition a human into something else if it's such a low rate? Given the low rate of mutations and the complexity of the evolutionary process, the impossibility of the evolution process, it is unlikely that a single-celled organism could evolve into a long-fin pilot whale-like creature within 2 billion years through the accumulation of random and accidental mutations alone. It's more likely the process of evolution involved a combination of genetic changes and such and such and such and such over a much longer period of time. So it's saying evolution is not possible in 2 billion years because the Earth is supposed to be 3.8 billion years, but a lot of that time it was supposedly a ball of hot molten rock, and then it was an ice covered with ice supposedly, and then because now they're trying to say that it's the ice that covered the globe. That's what caused the great inconformity. It was the ice, the glacier. Well, that's a stretch. That's the first time I ever heard that. I thought it was funny. They say the great inconformity is caused by the was when the ice was covered by um, ice, scraped all everything off, and then somehow the sediments came back on top of the great inconformity all over the world. That's not quite explained, but anyway. But there it is. That's one right there. I just thought it was interesting. But I do have some other ones. I thought they were interesting too. We can go through, but it's a little bit tedious probably. So what am I going to do now? Let me go back here. See what I got. Oh, I got absolutely no one watching. No, I'm just kidding. Got one person, according to that, which is not always accurate, but that's about it. But it's interesting, if somebody wants to use it. This is probably better than the Chat GPT because it does actually. I mean, it can keep track of a lot of what I said. I mean, obviously, I said quite a bit here, and it's not the only thing I asked. I asked a whole bunch of other different things too. But it was going back and forth, back and forth. So it's finally seems to be seeing the impossibility of evolution because because I'm saying, well, this is not possible, but he said, well, you're not understanding evolution. What you're asking for is scientifically invalid. So I'm saying, okay, show me evidence. Give me evidence for the scientifically invalid belief of evolution then. Since it's and then that's when it gave me this. But I had to include every time he came up or it came up with a problem, I just included it in the question. So that's why the question turned out to be so well. It was started out pretty long to begin with, but I just kept on adding stuff, and finally, it gave me a straight answer. It said, "Show me the best case scenario of the mathematical possibility for the claim that a supposed single-celled common ancestor made enough accidental random mistakes which have to then be naturally selected for. Show me the number of mutations required and then compare it to the known rate of mistakes that are compatible, viable, functional, accidental, random mistakes which have to be naturally selected for to turn into a male and female worm-like thing over time. In other words, from a single cell to a worm-like thing. Then a vertebrate, then a fish, then an amphibian, then a reptile, then a mammal, then it supposedly went back into the water. Can't even believe we're even talking about this. And then it had its limbs turned into fins, then grew a tail that wags up and down instead of back and forth, and then got a blowhole, and then became more intelligent than humans, like the long fin pilot whale within 2 billion years. Keeping in mind that the lifespan of a single celled organism isn't the same as a lifespan of a whale or any of the other supposed intermediaries. And one time, the first time I said that, he said, well, that makes it even more complex. Makes it even more hard to determine or impossible. Compare the number of compatible viable mutations that are selected for through natural selection with the number of possible events in the universe. Evolution is my claim. He didn't even get to this part. But maybe he was thinking in the back of his mind. So that's when he basically just admitted that evolution is not possible. Right here. AgentGPT said evolution is not possible because mutations occur in living organisms at a relatively low rate. Rate of mutations is minus 10 to the minus 8 per base pair per generation. In other words, it's very low rate. Given the low rate of mutation and complexity of the evolutionary process, it's unlikely that a single-celled organism could evolve into a long-finned pilot whale-like creature within 2 billion years through the accumulation of random accidental mutations alone. It's more likely that the process of evolution, if it exists, involved a combination, which it doesn't exist because we're devolving. We're not evolving, we're devolving. A combination of genetic changes, natural selection, environmental factors. It's magical matter. It's a belief in magical matter. Scientifically invalid belief in magical matter. That's what it is. Oh, okay. Anyway, environmental factors over a much longer period of time. 2 billion years isn't enough to turn a single-celled organism into a pilot whale. Jamie Russell, Christian Miller. Hi, bro. What's up? What's going on? So there you go. This is AgentGPT. It's pretty good. Not too bad. It's better than the other one so far. It's the best one I've found so far, but there might be a better one somewhere. So, all right. God bless everybody. Take care. See you on the flip side, as we used to say back in the day. If anybody knows what that means on the flip side. God bless. Take care. Stay true. And you'll be blessed.